Good evening. We welcome you to tonight's debate sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Lackawanna County. My name is Diana Dakey. I've been the coordinator for tonight's debate. And we especially want to thank Clark Summit University for supplying this lovely venue. And I want to thank Mel Walker, the Vice President for Alumni Communications and External Relations, as well as Katie Raven, Executive Assistant to the Vice President of Student Development, who couldn't be here tonight, but they were very instrumental in helping us arrange this. In the back of the room is Paul Golden with the university, and thanks, Paul, for helping out also. Just about the League of Women Voters, it's a national organization of men and women with state and local chapters. The League of Women Voters is nonpartisan, which means we do not support or oppose any political party or candidate. And the mission of the League is to promote political responsibility through the informed and active participation by citizens in their government. We encourage you to join the League. Membership information can be found on your program, and or online at our website. We do encourage you to take an active interest in this community service that the League provides, and do join us. You can also support our work by making a donation on your way out. There's a little white basket out there. Donations help us cover the costs, including taping, so that debates can be viewed by a wider audience. ECTV is taping tonight's debate. This is not a live broadcast. The tape debate will be aired on Comcast 19 local TV, so please check the ECTV schedule, which can be found at this link on the front of your program, or through links from the League of Women Voters of Lackawanna County's website. The most important upcoming event, of course, is Election Day, Tuesday, November 8th, so don't forget to vote. I'm sure everybody in this room will be voting. A few procedural items for the audience. Please turn off and silence your phones or any other devices. And please be aware that it is our policy that no person, candidate, or political group is allowed to use or edit any media from a League event for campaign purposes. Also, use of the media requires the express written permission of the League of Women Voters of Lackawanna County. No excerpts or sound bites may be taken from tonight's debate. I'd like to introduce our moderator. Dr. Jean Harris will serve as the moderator for tonight's debate. And Dr. Harris is presently chair of the Political Science Department of the University of Scranton, and she is currently on the board of the League of Women Voters of Lackawanna County, and has been a past president as well. Thank you, Jean, for moderating tonight's debate.
Thank you, Diane. I thought this would be easy. Just tilt it. There you go. Got it. Sorry. I did get directions, and then I forgot. I am technically challenged. Tonight's debate is between candidates for the 114th Pennsylvania State House District. The candidate elected on November 8th will take office in January 2017 for a 2-year term. The debate's format tonight, it'll be about a 60-minute event. There will be no opening statements from the candidates. The candidates will answer the same set of questions, and no questions have been provided to them ahead of time. The questions were developed by League of Women Voters members. All questions will have a 2-minute response time, and each candidate will be allowed up to 5 one-minute rebuttals over the course of the event. Candidates will then be allowed a 2-minute closing statement. We ask that you hold all applause. I will introduce the candidates, but we ask that you hold all applause until the end of the closing statements. And so, with no further ado, I'd like to introduce our candidates who are sitting here in alphabetical order. Sid Michaels Kavulich is the incumbent. He's a Democrat, a graduate of Riverside High School and Williamsport Area Community College. His professional experience includes a sportscaster for WVRE-TV, general manager for St. Anne's Media, and sports director at WYOU-TV. His civic experience Includes member of several boards, including Goodwill Industries and Broadway Theater of Northeast Pennsylvania. His political experience, he was a communications specialist for the state of Pennsylvania, the Senate of Pennsylvania, and then Pennsylvania State Representative since 2011. Mr. Kavulich and his wife Linda live in Taylor, Pennsylvania. Thank you for joining us this evening. Our second candidate is Cheryl Scandale-Murnin. She's a Republican. Her education includes she earned a BS in Business Administration and an MA in Interior Architecture from Marywood University. She also earned a certificate in Sustainable Community Planning and Design from the Boston Architectural College, and most recently she earned an MBA in Community and Economic Development from Southern New Hampshire University. Her professional experience includes she has worked as a designer, senior project designer, and director of design for several organizations. She was the founding president of MOS Design, and she was the chief executive officer of Green Space 2. She currently serves as president of the Lackawanna County Medical Society Alliance and as an adjunct faculty member at Marywood University. Her civic experience includes membership on the executive board of Interior Design Legislative Coalition for Pennsylvania. She also currently serves in various capacities on numerous boards, including director of Marywood University Alumni Association, president of Scranton Community College Community Concerts, president of state and regional boards, International Design Association, chair of the Waverly Community House, and she's also a member of other boards, including the Executive Board of the Cultural Council of Luzerne County, the Executive Board of the Junior League of Scranton, the President's Council of the Electric Theater Company, and the Financial Allocation Panel for the United Way of Lackawanna County. Thank you for joining us this evening. So I will start with the first question, and based on our pulling of straws, Cheryl will be answering the first question first. So this question goes to what drew you to politics. People decide to run for government office for a variety of reasons. Please tell us what drew you to politics.
Well, during the course of my career, I had an opportunity to interface with politics and policymakers at a variety of levels, whether it was a local level, state or federal level, related to my business in building design and construction. And I began to really increase my interest in what drives public policy and how public policy can affect really positive changes for communities. And one of the things that has really drove my interest was the fact that as a small business owner, I could see that a lot needs to be done to help small businesses thrive and to grow. And now that my sons are nearing, one is out of college, one is nearing graduation, I'm looking around and I see that the economy has not come back the way it ought to. There's a lot of help for government agencies and large companies, but not a lot for small businesses. And I really would like to address small business and small business development, and also, because of my background, issues of sustainability and community planning. I think they make a very good fit together because they all address public policy in one way or another.
Thank you. Sid, the same question to you.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank the League of Women Voters for having this debate and also for granting me the one-week delay. Last week we were in Harrisburg and we were kind of, with the last week of the legislative session, kind of between a rock and a hard place, and I just didn't want to miss the debate last week because we were on the floor. So again, I want to thank my opponent and I want to thank the League for granting me this, the one-week delay. My entire life has been one, I feel, of service, public service. In a way, when I was in the profession of television, in my volunteer work with the church and with the community, and being out among the people of northeastern Pennsylvania, and in particular the 114th District, I got a chance to hear what the people's concerns were, what were their issues, where they were hurting, where they needed help. And that, combined with my passion or my my desire to serve the public was what pushed me toward a political career. And I just wanted the opportunity to make a difference. I wanted the opportunity to be able to do something to help the area where I was born, where I was raised, where my children were born and raised, where my grandchildren are now living and being raised. And not only the area, but all of northeastern Pennsylvania and all of the state of Pennsylvania. The opportunity to be able to do things that make life better for all of us as Pennsylvanians is what really drove me to politics.
Thank you. And feel free, both of you, to look at the great audience we have. You don't have to look at me. You're welcome to, but feel free to look at the audience. So the second question we'll start with Sid answering. And this deals with trust in government. The level of trust in our government is reaching all-time lows. Inappropriate emails with sexist and racist comments shared by judges and other government officials, legislators using taxpayer money to travel and attend non-government related sporting events. Add to these the automatic annual cost of living increase that's given to elected officials, salary increases that most hardworking Pennsylvanians don't get. Please share with us at least one legislative action you would support in an effort to revitalize citizen trust in Pennsylvania's governments. And this goes to you first, Sid.
Well, I would support all legislative efforts to restore trust in our government and our elected officials. For example, when I first was elected and I went to orientation, the first thing I was told was, you're getting your paycheck, your first day at work, and you'll have a raise. And I looked at the person who told me, I said, what do you mean? They said, well, there's an automatic cost of living increase. And I said, I don't want it. And they said, you have to take it. I said, what do you mean you have to take it? By law, you have to take the automatic cost of living increase. So the first thing I did, the very first piece of legislation that I introduced was eliminating the automatic COLA. And I had to keep my head down for about 2 or 3 weeks in Harrisburg when I did that because of the feedback that I got. My first 3 terms, we received an automatic COLA. Each year, I wrote a check back every month to the Treasury with that increase and gave back my COLA. I think that I do not take a per diem. I said when I was first elected I would not take a per diem. I do not. I turn in actual expenses. I post my expenses online. And I think when we are elected by the people, we have a duty to serve those people, to be as transparent as possible, and to be as honest as possible, as open as possible, and to serve those people with the utmost of integrity.
Thank you. To you, Cheryl?
Trust is a fickle thing. You need to really be honest consistently with people in order to earn their trust. A lot of people think that you, because of your position, you're due some amount of trust or even respect, but that's something that needs to be earned. And in government, we see a lot of people running into trouble because they forget that. A lot of people, for instance, in the private sector, I've spent my entire career in the private sector. In the private sector, in a service business, we're not allowed to receive gifts of any sort from any vendor, any sales rep, or a client. And we see that still going on in government today, and it's hard to imagine that's still allowed. So I would like to see gifts being eliminated altogether, if they have not already. And people begin to lose trust with elected officials when they see elected officials saying one thing or doing another, or saying one thing and have the reality be something different. Last year, there were an awful lot of people who were very distressed about the whole delayed budget. And this year there was a lot of handshaking and patting on the back about passing a budget on time that didn't have any taxes. There were no new taxes. Well, the reason there were no new taxes is because there was no revenue to match the expenses. And so that's not really a budget. And people take a look at that and they're like, what's with that? That's not true.
Thank you. We're still going to talk about issues of concern to the League of Women Voters, which is trust in government, voting reform, and good government. Ensuring that all voters have access to the ballot box is one of the essential functions of government. Yet here in Pennsylvania, voters have some of the most limited access to the ballot box. Pennsylvania is one of only 9 states without any of the following reforms: early voting, no excuse vote by mail, or same-day registration. And all of these reforms show that voter turnout increases when you have those reforms in your state. So the question, which Cheryl will answer first: if elected, will you sponsor legislation to support increasing access to the ballot here in Pennsylvania?
Yes, absolutely. I think there's no reason to attempt to decrease access to the ballot. It's our right as American citizens to vote, and nothing should get in the way with that. I would support early voting. Was that one of the things that you recommended? Early voting. I would support online registration. The no excuse absentee mail-in, I believe, is an absentee, no excuse absentee. We don't have that currently, but that's not much different than the absentee that we have currently, except you don't have to prove you've been out of the district. So I would support that. Same-day registration, which is one that often comes up, I would be concerned only because I'm not convinced that there's a way to very quickly document a person's residence in that particular ward. And I'm thinking of when we used to sign our kids up for Little League baseball and football, and if you didn't have a utility bill, you weren't going to play. So if there could be some technology that were put in place to be able to access that database quickly and make certain it was correct, then I would very likely give some support to that one as well.
Thank you. Sid?
The right to vote is one of the things that makes this country as great as it is. And I think any opportunities that we create legislatively for people to be able to vote, I think should be done. Again, early voting, we see how many early voting people have already voted in this presidential election. Same-day registration, again, makes it more accessible for people to have their voice heard. Internet voting. Open elections is something in primaries. Open right now, unless you're a member of one of the 2 major parties, you cannot run for office in a primary. I think we need to open up our primaries to anyone who wants to run of any party. And also, we've seen a real hard push the past couple of years to suppress voter turnout through voter ID. I have no problem with voter ID whatsoever, but it was tried to push through the last election. It wasn't done the right way, and it was tried to force through. But again, I have no problems with voter ID if it's done correctly and it gives everyone the opportunity to secure a proper ID and be able to vote. Any measures that would open up voting to the public, I am all for.
Thank you.
Could I
A rebuttal?
that?
Sure.
I believe in the primaries, if I'm not mistaken, I think third-party candidates can run, and possibly not independents. The problem is that if you're not part of the major 2 parties, you cannot vote unless you join one of those parties, because those elections are being run by private organizations, whereas the general is a national election. But I'm pretty sure that third-party candidates can run in a primary.
And
The problem is that you can't vote if you're not part of that party.
And just to correct myself, I feel anybody should have the opportunity, to make it clear, anybody should have the opportunity to run. We have a free country, and anybody should have the opportunity to run and vote in the general or the primary.
Thank you. One more good government question before we move on to some other topics. Statewide organizations, including the League of Women Voters and Common Cause of Pennsylvania, have formed Fair Districts PA, a statewide effort for redistricting reform. Pennsylvania is home to some of the most gerrymandered districts in the U.S. Unfairly drawn districts disenfranchise voters and make it more difficult for legislators to effectively represent constituents who are much more spread out geographically. Do you support legislation to establish an independent citizens redistricting commission with authority over both state legislative districts and congressional districts? And this question goes to Sid first. Thank you.
We are probably the poster child for bad districting or gerrymandering in the country. Every 10 years after the federal census, our legislative lines are redrawn. And in Pennsylvania, we have lines that are drawn legislatively rather than geographically. I am 100% in favor of a nonpartisan, independent commission that would redraw these lines after our next census according to geography rather than political lines. We need this. Pennsylvania has got to make this correction, and I would support any type of nonpartisan panel that would redraw the lines.
Thank you. Cheryl?
Yes, I would support this kind of legislation. One only need look at the Abingtons in the 114th district, which was always thought to be the location of the majority of Republicans. The Abingtons, which are all together by geography and by culture and location, has been split up into 3 districts. So it is mathematically impossible in the 114th district to have a Republican majority because of the way the Abingtons has been split up. It's been split up among the 114th, it's been split up among the 114th, the 113th, and the number escapes me, the one that includes Dalton. So there was a good job at attempting to split that up. I would certainly approve a nonpartisan, independent activity that would create a more fair process that doesn't dilute the voting power of any minority or ethnic group. And I think right now, clearly, it's political. The lines are drawn according to whomever happens to be in power at the time. And the lines that have drawn this district right now were done in 2010. That was during the Rendell administration, but it happens in both administrations because politics and politicians want to be able to create safe seats. Safe seats are nice for incumbent politicians, but it doesn't really serve the needs of the voters well.
Thank you. We're going to move on to some issues of pension and environment and economic development. So first on pension. Pennsylvania taxpayers' unfunded pension liability has more than doubled from less than $30 billion to $63 billion. A recent Moody's report on the state of pension liabilities concludes that states with large gaps, like Pennsylvania, will be forced to direct more money toward their pension systems just to keep unfunded liabilities from growing. This means fewer dollars for schools, roads, bridges, and other basic services. What plan or legislation do you support to address this issue? And Cheryl, this goes to you first.
Well, I believe that a promise is a promise, and I don't like to see contracts broken. I think that's just criminal. So any people who are currently in the pension program need to stay in the pension program. They have been working in good faith and with the expectation that they're going to earn a certain pension when it's time for them to retire. The problem is that the state has been unsuccessful in keeping that fund solvent so that it meets the $60 billion shortfall. The stock market has a lot to do with that, but let's face it, these pensions are the same as the Social Security fund. They just get raided by politicians. Money is borrowed, it's never reinstated. So I would suggest keeping the people who are currently there in the pension system, but I believe in moving forward just simply because it makes good business and it works really well in the private sector. I think new hires ought to go into a 401k. A 401k gives those employees greater control over their retirement and their stock value and their fund value, and they're not always at the mercy of worrying about an underfunded pension by the state.
Thank you. Sid?
The pension problem began a few years ago when the stock market was going very well, and the state decided not to contribute its fair share. The workers did continue to put their share into the pension fund. And then when the stock market took a downturn, that's when this whole thing happened and we ran into problems. So if you try to take the current workers out of the plan, you are going to run into the risk of lawsuits, which may cost the state even more money than is currently the deficit that we're looking at with the pension fund. We can't punish the workers, as my opponent said, who upheld their share of the bargain. Governor Wolf, in his budget, his first budget, suggested floating bonds, modernizing the liquor stores, and then using the profits from that modernization to pay down the pension bonds. I agree with something like that, but now that we have passed legislation to modernize the liquor stores, if we move forward and float bonds to help pay down the pension, we're going to have to come up with a funding formula to pay off those bonds. I think we should find a way to do that. It's like you have a credit card. You have a credit card and you reached your limit. If you cut up that credit card, you still have to pay that credit card off. So that's the situation we have with the pension system. The House passed a bill in the spring which placed new employees in a defined benefit up to $50,000, and then everything over $50,000, they would be in similar to a 401k or a defined contribution. That is on target to work, but it's going to take a few years to work. So there are solutions out there, but I think the most important thing is for the legislature to get working on this and make sure that a fix is found soon, so we're not mortgaging the future of our residents here in Pennsylvania.
Thank you. A rebuttal? Sure. 1 minute.
My one concern about bonds, because they're really popular with municipalities and with states, and in particular with a financial product called a pension obligation bond, which is what a lot of states like to do to try and fix their pension funds. The problem with that is, and it's the same even at local levels when cities float bonds, it's a one-time injection of cash. And so if you're floating a $60 billion bond, the state now is really encumbered by a much more rigid economic and financial situation within which they need to make decisions, and so that really hampers your decision making. I think on the front end it sounds terrific because that's what lots of cities and states do. But when you put in that one-time inflection of cash, and then what? If you still have people in the pension moving forward, Pennsylvania has not demonstrated the kind of discipline that it needs to keep that pension that's in arrears complete. But so now how can we trust them moving forward to keep any of those new liabilities solvent?
Thank you.
But what we need is that fix. We need to get that off our backs so we are not continuing to pay more money by letting it stretch out down the line. But again, the key is a funding stream that is going to be able to pay off that and pay that down so we can get rid of it, and then we can move forward.
Thank you. Environmental concerns. This question Sid will start with answering. Do you support or oppose the Keystone landfill expansion? And please explain.
Okay. I think that we have a Department of Environmental Protection in place, and the DEP, we entrust them to oversee places like the Keystone landfill. And if they are in place to, the Keystone landfill has a right to apply for expansion. If they are doing everything right and the DEP goes through all of their applications, if the DEP finds that they are doing everything to ensure the health and the safety of the residents of the area, of the region, then as a business, the Keystone Landfill has a right to apply for that, and they have a right to operate. And again, we have to trust that the Department of Environmental Protection that we put in place is going to do the right thing, and it's going to make sure that the people of northeastern Pennsylvania are kept safe, and the environment of northeastern Pennsylvania is kept safe as well.
Thank you. Cheryl?
I do not support the expansion as it has been proposed. A 300-foot tall expansion that goes out to 50 years. That's an enormous expansion. And currently there's a ruling against them that has limited them to no more than their current height. So if they want to increase the volume of solid waste material that comes into their landfill, all they can do is grow out and expand their footprint. But there are neighborhoods and other businesses around there, so they just can't move into that. They can't commandeer that land. And Sid is correct. Private companies do have a right to expand. But private companies, particularly the kind like a landfill or other hazardous materials businesses, don't operate in a vacuum. And so we're being asked to trust the DEP that in 50 years everything is going to be fine because they've looked at it today. And what we know today is just incomplete compared to what we're going to know in 50 years. And the last thing we want to do is see a Love Canal Superfund type of site created in Dunmore, where not only do you have to deal with the landfill and the leachate and any other toxins that may be found in the future. When you have a Superfund site, now people have to actually leave their homes and move away. I would support any legislation that, with regard to landfills and other hazardous material companies, that have strong regulations to protect the environment, protect the health of people in the community, and also to protect irreplaceable view sheds. One of the biggest concerns of people that are opponents are that this is going to be a gigantic mountain that dwarfs the natural landscape around it. I support Senator Casey's trash bill because that gives us the opportunity to limit the amount of trash that actually comes in.
Okay, thank you. Staying with the environment, new regulations protecting the environment and public health from both unconventional fracking and conventional oil and gas operations received final approval in April. However, Senate Bill 279 was amended in the House committee to block the conventional oil and gas regulations from going into effect despite years of developing the new laws with strong public input. So this question goes to Cheryl first. Do you support or oppose greater regulation of oil and gas operations? Why or why not?
I do. But I think the regulations should be such that they don't force this industry out of the state. Just as I said with the landfill, it's important to protect. It's important for environmental protection. It's important for health. And it's important for the community. You've got to clean air, clean water, controlling toxins that are harmful to people is very important. But at the same time, because that's potentially a high petroleum, high activity sort of business that affects how it impacts the ground and the community around it. It needs to be regulated, but again, the regulation should be not such that it pushes them right out of the state, because that's a business activity that brings in good, very high-paying jobs, and it brings a lot of wealth potentially into the state. So that way, you really have to be able to keep a strong balance between the social issues, the health issues, and the business profit issues.
Thank you. Sid?
Growing up in northeastern Pennsylvania, and in particular Taylor, I saw firsthand the effect of the extraction of natural resources with the mine subsidence and the complete decimation of the neighborhood where I grew up. And we cannot allow ourselves to repeat the mistakes of the past. I think we need strict regulations on drilling and any natural resource extraction. We need to be we need to have the utmost in safety and the regulations that are going to ensure the safety of the environment and ensure the safety of the people. And we've seen through legislation that some of the legislation has been pushed through. We saw the Supreme Court invalidate some of the provisions of Act 13 recently because it does not adequately protect the environment and the people of Pennsylvania. So I agree with Cheryl that we cannot over-regulate because we have an opportunity here, a great economic opportunity in Pennsylvania with the natural gas that is beneath our ground. So very strict regulations, work hand in hand with the industry and make sure that we do this safely and as economically viable as possible.
Thank you. Economic development and gas royalties. State House Bill 1391 proposes a guaranteed minimum royalty payment for unconventional gas well production. This proposal is in response to complaints raised by property owners who have found their gas royalties reduced because they are charged for post-production costs. In some cases, people have actually received negative royalty statements, suggesting they owe money. What is your position with regard to the royalty concerns raised by Pennsylvania landowners? And Sid, you get this first.
I support House Bill 1391. Pennsylvania's Minimum Royalties Act guarantees landowners at least 12.5% in payments, and this isn't happening. Some of these people are getting bills after the post-production. 1391 does not remove the post-production costs. It just guarantees that those landowners get at least 12.5%. Article 1 of the Constitution says the General Assembly cannot pass a law impairing the obligation of any contracts. This law does not change contractual obligations. Every lease enacted after 1979 must provide at least 12.5% royalties or is invalid. 1391 confirms that.
Thank you. Cheryl?
Can I confirm, is the actual question whether or not I would be in support of leaseholders' rights not to be overcharged by the drilling companies?
Yeah, so it's wide enough. What is your position with regard to royalty concerns raised? So how would you address their concerns?
Well, spending my entire career in private industry, a contract is a contract. And you can't come along with a bait and switch tactic and suddenly say, oh, by the way, you owe us so much in our expenses that we don't even need to pay you a royalty now. That's what it seems to me is going on. So again, consumer protection against those kinds of fraudulent, iffy sort of business practices, I would definitely be against. That's what consumer protection laws are there for. It sounds, in that description, that's a predatory business practice, and I would work hard to curtail that at all cost.
Thank you. Minimum wage. All of Pennsylvania's neighboring states have raised the state minimum wage over the past years, but our minimum wage here in Pennsylvania remains at $7.25. A person working full-time, 40 hours a week, for 52 weeks a year earns $15,080. And if you're in a family of one parent, one child, this is below the federal poverty threshold. So this question goes to Cheryl first. What is your position on increasing the state's minimum wage?
Well, first and foremost, I believe in equal pay for equal work. And it is clear that someone who is working 40 hours a week for $7.24 an hour cannot sustain themselves. They can't sustain themselves and they can't sustain a family. That salary is below poverty line. And so what you're doing is you've got people now who are being forced onto public assistance. And it really becomes an issue of job creation. You know, those minimum wage jobs were intended as entry-level jobs or for students earning tuition, and now we have people who are underemployed and overskilled, or college graduates in those jobs because that's the only thing that they can afford. Something obviously needs to be done, and I'm not a fan of legislating wages because it makes the government a silent partner in your business. However, in large businesses, they can certainly absorb the cost of raising that wage. And in fact, many corporations are opting to do that on their own. Walmart, Costco, IKEA, Starbucks, just to name a few, have opted to incrementally raise that wage upwards of $9, $10, $11, almost to $12. That, in the business world, is enough to encourage other businesses to jump onto that bandwagon because, number one, they view it as a good thing to do. It gives them goodwill for their brand in the community. They're viewed as a good community partner. But I worry about smaller businesses that have to rely on slow receivables to cover their payroll. If it came to the point where it needed to be legislated, or it was legislated, or if they could be encouraged to do that on their own, I'd like to see a tax credit for small businesses that opt to raise their minimum wage.
Thank you.
I am in favor of raising the minimum wage. Now, some figures have put it at $15 an hour, but I think that might be too high. While we want to raise the minimum wage, we don't want it to be a job killer or put undue pressure on some of our small businesses. So maybe we look at something around that's based on the cost of living, or maybe around $10 an hour. I think that could be a big help to those families who are trying to get by on these minimum wage jobs. When you look at $7.25 an hour, that's $290 a week. A single person alone, before taxes, cannot live on $290 a week. The other uptick of a higher minimum wage is that more money is put into the system, and we could get our economy going, or at least it could spur the economy a little bit. So yes, I am in favor of raising the minimum wage, and as my opponent has said, also equal pay for equal work, definitely.
Thank you. In terms of the corporate taxes in the state, are you willing to place on your agenda elimination of the Delaware loophole, which allows at least 40% of corporations making profits in Pennsylvania to get away with not paying the Pennsylvania state corporate taxes? And this question goes to Sid first.
Absolutely. I'm on the Finance Committee in Harrisburg, and a few years ago this first came up, and the contention was that we closed the Delaware loophole. We did not. We still allow corporations to set up shop in Delaware and be able to get away with not paying income tax or taxes in Pennsylvania. We need combined reporting so that they cannot get away with this. Also, in an effort to spur job growth, I am all for, we have one of the highest corporate net income taxes in the entire country at 9.99%. I would be in favor of lowering that as far as 4.99 or maybe 5.99%. That would help make Pennsylvania more business friendly. Other ways to spur the economy, we have Keystone Opportunity Zones, and we have tax credits for businesses. But what happens is, especially with the KOZs, we allow tax-free zones for 10 years, and nothing is done with those zones. I think we need to put conditions on tax incentives, Keystone Opportunity Zones, where the land has to be developed or jobs have to be created, or else that funding has to be given back to the state. We need to make Pennsylvania more business friendly, and there are ways that we can do it.
Thank you. Cheryl?
I do agree we need to do something because there is a lot of tax revenue that is not being enjoyed by Pennsylvania. 9.99 is one of the highest in the country, and so I also believe that it needs to be lowered to help keep companies in Pennsylvania where they're contributing to the tax base. And I've seen numbers ranging from 4 to 6, and I think that's probably 4 to 6% as opposed to 9.99. And so I think that's a reasonable range. I worry, however, when I hear combined reporting as a fix to this, because there has not been a clear definition of defined reporting. There are an awful lot of, I have heard it described as because right now what we have is separate accounting in Pennsylvania. And so combined reporting allows the state to tax the company on its taxable income based on what its activities in Pennsylvania, and that is not correct. Combined reporting, and I had to do a lot of research on this because I didn't want to misspeak, but combined reporting means that Pennsylvania can tax a multi-state, multi-location corporation, which is really at issue with the tax loophole. They can tax them on the combined cumulative taxable activities generated in every single state that that company is based in. And what company would want to stay in a state that has that much control over how much they can keep for their own company? That's an invitation to leave Pennsylvania. Yet another invitation to leave Pennsylvania. And by most companies, that's really viewed as a tax grab. Small companies, which are also corporations, really do benefit from incorporating in Delaware because they're a small company. They are based in a single location and don't really have the option to move.
Thank you. Excuse me, a question related to public safety. Many rural townships in the state do not have their own police forces. They therefore rely on the state police. Municipalities and other local governments that do have police forces that they raise revenue to support have been arguing that the situation is not fair to their taxpayers who are subsidizing the cost of police coverage in rural townships without their own forces. So the question is, what is your position on this debate? What, if any, legislative action would you support to address this issue? And the question goes to Cheryl first.
That has been an ongoing discussion where you have one community, in effect, just as you say, subsidizing police protection for other communities. Before I moved back to this area, I lived in Maryland, where all public services were at a county level. That has been tossed around. Perhaps that's something we could look at, because then you're paying for the police force to cover the entire county. As with any issue, there are pros and cons to that. How you get around one community subsidizing another, I think that's always going to be an issue in a rural community. For instance, in Waverly, there's one police person. I think now there are two, so it's been an exponential growth. But that is a big issue in rural communities, and I think that deserves real, sincere research. I think that's an issue I've heard batted around a long time, and it never arrives at an answer. And that's the kind of thing where you've got to do real research, because if it's not covered, if the cost of that is not covered by a much larger entity, then some agreement has to come to terms between the small community and the other small community, which is just barely larger than it, as it is like in Clark Summit or elsewhere in the Abingtons. How does that get reconciled? And as far as I can tell, no one has a real answer to that. Thank you. Sid?
I've seen that problem in parts of the district. Actually, in Springbrook, which was part of the 114th district, before the redistricting, there was talk that they were being covered by the state police, but there were only 2 state police cars and 2 state police patrols in such a wide distance that it was very difficult to cover that area when there were any problems being held. I think probably one of the solutions is regionalization of police coverage. We've got to at least look at that, and we've got to try to move forward, and not only with police coverage, all of our safety services, with fire and in all of our public services. I think we need to look toward regionalization. Pennsylvania has over 2,500 municipalities, and that is more than the rest of the country combined. So we need to start combining services, and we need to get these communities together and find a way to regionalize services so that everybody can share the cost and everybody can share the protection. So I would, yes, I would sponsor legislation, and I would like to see the legislature look in that direction.
Thank you. Civic literacy. Several national studies have shown that high school graduates are unable to answer basic questions about U.S. government and politics. Civic literacy is a national problem. A bill was introduced in the Pennsylvania House to address this problem. The bill would require high school students to pass a test on basic facts of U.S. history and civics. The test all immigrants applying for U.S. citizenship must pass. Today, college graduates have about a 30% failing rate on that test. 90% of immigrants pass the test when they take it. Do you think civic literacy is a legitimate interest of the state's education system? And if so, would you support a civic literacy graduation requirement? And this goes to Sid first.
A majority of Americans polled feel that high school students should be able to pass the naturalization test to graduate. I feel it's important to prepare our high school students to be engaged citizens in democracy, and I think it is important. But first, however, as we struggle with education funding, I think our first priority should be the STEM courses, the sciences, the technologies, the English, and the math. They're of vital importance, particularly as our students compete in a global economy and with students from around the world. Again, I'm all for civic education, and I'm all for proper funding for education as well. So civic education courses, absolutely. I think we need them in our classes. But we as a legislature must show the fortitude to properly fund education and our school districts so that our students can get a complete education, and that includes civic literacy.
Thank you. Cheryl?
What are you asking me, if I approve the
So do you
test?
think that civic literacy is a legitimate interest of the state's education system? And if so, would you support a graduation requirement on civic literacy?
Yes. Yes, I would. I still to this day remember the things that I learned in civics going all the way back to middle school and even before. On being able to understand the nature and the structure of our government and how it works is an essential part of everybody's education. It is as important as learning math and science. And Sid touched on something very important in a global economy. I teach a lot of business classes at Marywood where I touch on international business issues, and all business now is international because we are in a global economy. And so if you are not, if you don't have a clear, well-educated understanding of how our government works, and you're really going to be at odds when you are out on your own and now you're negotiating all of the ins and outs of different government policies, different issues that you meet when you go overseas and expand a business or working in a different location. And without literacy, how can you fully participate in the government? How do you know how to vote? How can you understand when your government is working correctly or when it's abusing you? I definitely think it's important.
Thank you. I'm trying to calculate if we have time. I'll ask one more question before we go to closing statements, but I will ask that we just have 1-minute response times. This way we can get in the 2-minute closing statements. So is that okay with you, Diana? So this deals with the criminal justice system. The Sixth Amendment in the United States Constitution guarantees indigent criminal defendants the right to counsel. Currently, Pennsylvania is the only state that does not fund the legal defense of indigent criminal defendants. Our state government leaves the funding to county governments. In 2011, a state government report concluded that the state was not meeting its Sixth Amendment mandate. A recent state Supreme Court ruling now allows defendants to challenge the quality of legal counsel services they are provided, according to the Sixth Amendment. This could become a financial concern for the state, for the counties and the state. So what actions should the state legislature take to ensure that the Sixth Amendment right to counsel is protected here in Pennsylvania? And this will go to Cheryl first.
Well, I believe in protecting amendments. And if Pennsylvania is falling short, then it needs to do something to correct that. If I understand the preamble to your question, currently that cost falls to counties?
County governments, the state.
Whereas in other states, the state pick up the cost.
That is
And you're right, that is a financial consideration because Pennsylvania is, the budget is severely underfunded. On the other hand, how can you tell someone that because they are indigent and cannot afford a really expensive attorney that they don't have the right to sue for getting lousy representation? I would wonder first why Pennsylvania is the only state that does not provide for that protection and lets it fall on the counties. The counties need to be worrying about other things. So I think it needs to fold back up into the state so that Pennsylvania is in line with the other states. And like every other budgetary consideration, you have to be able to, there's got to be some sort of weighing of priorities.
Thank you.
Simple. Just stop the unfunded mandates. I've heard time and time again from people in this district and out of this district from communities how the state continues to lay unfunded mandates on the counties, on the communities. We've got to, if we're going to lay a mandate on in this case on the county, we must find a way to fund these mandates. So it's simple. Just try to eliminate or make a move to eliminate unfunded mandates on the counties.
Thank you. So we now move to the closing statements. Each candidate has 2 minutes to make a closing statement. And again, by the draw of the X piece of paper, Cheryl will go first with her closing statement.
Got the X factor. If you don't mind, I'm going to refer to my notes because this is my very first debate. I don't want to forget anything. First of all, I'd like to say thank you to the League of Women Voters and all of you that took time out of your own personal schedules to be here tonight. I am here asking for your vote. Like you, I'm not a politician. I am not a politician at all. This is my first time running for public office, and like so many of us, you know, politicians, not so much. I'm a taxpayer who wants to see our district and region become one that can hold the interest of our best and brightest instead of having them leave for greener pastures, looking for family and career jobs in the private sector. Our tax base is dwindling because we have not been able to attract young, outside people or families with new and inventive ideas to grow their business here. We have spectacular natural resources. The greatest of those are the people that have not given up on this area. Like many of you, I sat and wondered why things couldn't get better. And I decided that just wasn't good enough anymore. And I decided to make things better not only for my family, but for everyone else's. I spent nearly 25 years in the private sector as a small business owner and working mom, and 9 years teaching in the School of Business at Marywood. I see in my own students recognition that they must also leave home in order to pursue a career. My students need to look beyond the area and sometimes beyond the state to look for good jobs, and that's what inspired me to run for this office. I'm not running for a job for myself or a paycheck or just to get my name out there. I view public service as an honor, not to be squandered by satisfying political elites, but in satisfying the good people of the 114th District. You deserve better representation in Harrisburg. You deserve, did I run out of time already? Well, that doesn't seem very nice. Let me close to the end. I am here because I want to serve you. Politicians are not doing it for us. We need something more. We need someone who is going to be here as a voice for the people of the 114th District. We need someone who is interested in finding the people in the district and understanding what their issues are, not just laying a blanket on them.
One last clause.
And once more,
One last clause, please.
And once more, I ask for your vote on Tuesday. And thank you, and please drive safely home.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for being here this evening. Sid, thank you.
And I reiterate thank you to the League of Women Voters for having these all around the state. Over the past 6 years, my office has worked hard to bring results to the 114th Legislative District. Millions of dollars in projects have come here through local share grants, from economic development in places like Carbondale and Clark Summit, to public safety projects in Old Forge and Moosic. We brought home community improvement money for Simpson and Dixon City, and have helped with sewer authority funding in Scott Township. Recently, $1 million in infrastructure money to transform the Taylor Rail Yard into a transfer station, creating jobs, and another $1.5 million to Mayfield for a technology business, again, creating jobs. In Harrisburg, I'm sponsoring a bill that would bring all teachers in Pennsylvania under one health care plan, which would create millions in savings for the Commonwealth and remove from the table an issue in labor disputes. I'm looking for major movement in that in the next legislative session. I co-sponsored a bill requiring safety drills in our schools to keep our children safe in case of an intruder or a similar emergency. By the way, both of these bills are co-sponsored by Republicans from across the aisle, keeping with my promise to work in a bipartisan manner. Back home, I'm most proud of working with the Association of Boroughs in defeating Scranton's commuter tax, which we were told around the state that it couldn't happen. This has saved hundreds of dollars for each person that worked in the city of Scranton, yet lived in not only the 114th legislative district, but also other areas of northeastern Pennsylvania. Lastly, I am extremely proud of the great constituent servants and the phenomenal staff that I have in my offices in Taylor and Carbondale. Our tracking service will show that we do all possible to help anyone that comes into the office, no matter what party affiliation, and sometimes no matter where they live. Being an effective representative also means being out among the people, and that means the fire department breakfast, the church picnics, and serving at the Little Sisters and the Poor roast beef dinner, or the Felletays Festival in Old Forge. I promise to be transparent and serve the people, and I humbly ask for your vote so that I continue to do that in Harrisburg and here at home. Thank you.
Thank you. So that concludes this evening's debate. I leave you with a few reminders. First, check out the League's website for candidate information about the ballot proposal that's on the ballot with reference to judicial retirement age. And also, if you're looking to get involved in the League, all that information is on our website, which is on your program. Election Day is this Tuesday, November 8th. Please vote. Thank you.